if there is one thing we all agree in data, hopefully, I hope we can agree on that, is that we have lots of terminology, and many of those things are defined in different ways, and they mean different things depending who you talk to. And so if you pair that with the rate of evolution of technology itself, it becomes almost an explosive mix where, it's hard to even reason, it's hard to share ideas, learn different points of view, and therefore it's hard to innovate. And there are many books that I read recently on the topic of clarifying this data mess we're living at the moment, and one that really caught my attention is The Informed Company: How to Build Modern Agile Data Stacks That Drive Winning Insights. We'll dive into the book in a great detail today with my guest, but before we do that, I want to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about. So the focus of this one is going to be on essentially the evolution of the data stack and how better tools essentially highlight the need of think rigorously. And my guest today is Matt Davis. Matt has 10 years industry experience using data and is currently the senior product marketing manager for data at Atlassian. Previously, he worked at Chartio as head of data, and Audacity as product lead for the School of Data Science. And data has become a prerequisite skill set for more and more known data jobs as well. And so Matt is really passionate about making data concepts more easily understood to increase data literacy for everyone. And we couldn't be more aligned in terms of our missions with the mission of discovering data. Today we will talk about the process of creating data products, the difference between data lakes, data warehouses, and data marts, and why they're all needed, and it's not one versus the other. Why source data must be copied at least once, despite this is not something the engineers are particularly keen on doing. Transformational patterns, ETL and ELT, the problem of data security, access control, how do you maintain a source of truth, some of the challenges in sharing clean data with the rest of the organization, and last but not least, the role of data literacy and a bunch of other topics. So I'm really, really excited to have you on the show, Matt. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with a term that I found on your book that I found really interesting: source hell. Can you tell me a little bit about more? What's source hell? Why do we need to worry about it?
Yeah, so initially, it's actually sort of a positive development, which is almost every tool that you use nowadays spins off data. So there are so many sources that you can potentially mine for insights. But when you're a startup, a new company, trying to wrangle that amount of data is super hard. So you oftentimes have things that are out of date. You don't know how to model the data. You're evaluating the data in all these different places. And it's just a real challenge to try to build knowledge on top of all of this potential data that you have access to.
I was thinking about this morning how to tackle this, and I want to play a game where I am the skeptical and I'm keep asking you the tough questions, being the data illiterate that knows nothing about replication and access control. And so why, and this might sound really a stupid question, but why can't we do the same as we do with our Google Docs and our SharePoints? Why can't data be in one single place and just share a link to people that need it, and we're done with it? Why do we need to integrate that data in a single place?
So data inherently is generated from multiple places. So again, like it could be from Zendesk, your production database, Salesforce, Google Analytics. All these places have super important information that is very valuable to evaluate in their own right. Google Analytics, for instance, has plenty of visualization capabilities built right in, but there's huge insight potential by combining those data sets together. So knowing which pages you have on your website that actually drive marketing qualified leads that convert and maybe do some important action in your app. That whole story is across multiple sources. So it forces you to combine. Um, and also, it's important to note that your production database, if you're just running queries right on top of it, you're potentially impacting the performance of your application. And so even that needs to be abstracted away so that your queries are only affecting your analytics and not your app performance as well.
Right. But we keep talking about the evolution of technology. This is still part of the game where I'm the other side of the conversation. We keep talking about these technologies that are evolve and they're so powerful. Now, what do we need to worry about performance? Can't we just keep crunching and keep sending queries? And why do we really need to replicate?
Yeah, so kind of the big developments in this space and kind of the dawn of the modern data stack got started at least 10 or 15 years ago at this point with columnar databases. So these are databases that are better at doing aggregations on the column level, which is a typical analytic function, whereas most applications run on a row or transactional model where it's very good at finding individual rows and updating individual rows. So we unlocked a ton of analytic performance by making that architecture change. There's several other reasons as well, but that's kind of the core concept. So that really kicked things off. Then you had these set of ELT tools that made it very easy to grab data from, again, this source hell that we were talking about and bring them to that warehouse. And then more recently, you had DBT, which is now allowing you to dramatically lower the bar on modeling that data and combining it together. So all those forces are kind of making it just much easier to work with all the data together. In terms of, why can't we just query our application database? You can, people do, engineers do all the time to check things. But when you're doing analytical queries, you are potentially actually crunching quite a large amount of data. I don't think it's maybe appreciated how much computation is being done. Even on a fairly well-tuned data warehouse, certain queries that you would think are typical will take seconds, which is meaningful. And so, in an application database, any sort of thing that's consuming compute could potentially affect things. So it's not always, but when you're doing these analytical queries, there's definitely the chance that you could have it hang up on it or just suck too much compute.
Yeah, you're really like talking about the scooter and the truck analogy in your book, which I loved. I've been looking for simple way to explain the difference between transactional and analytical storage, but I think that the one that you guys picked is really really effective. Everybody knows the agility of a motorbike or a scooter, and compared to the sheer power of a large truck. And so it's really about what do you need to do. And for an application, response time is really important. People get bored, if they wait more than 200 milliseconds, and you're gonna get into trouble if you're an analyst querying a Postgres production database and you're looking at a guy that did it. So I can testify that you're gonna make some enemies because people obviously rely on the performance of that thing. It has to be live, and the user experience depends on it. And if you start querying, especially if you don't know what you're doing, like me when I started, and you put a star after a select, and things get really really tricky.
Yeah, and I think that's again one of these maybe underappreciated things where writing a very simple query again could hit an enormous amount of your schema, and require the database to process all that information. And so, like you're saying, if you just do select star from like your transactions table or some table that has just an enormous amount of rows, it takes real time. It's not a Google search. It's something more intense than that.